Born in a Scottish legacy on August 25, 1919, George Wallace was the first child in the family of George and Moselle Wallace of Clio, Alabama, in Barber County. Young George Wallace enrolled in school in September 1925 at Clio Elementary. It's told that as a small boy, he climbed the water tank at Clio just to see what it was like. In his early teens, he was seen going door to door, campaigning for Fred Gibson, who was running for Secretary of State. As a high school freshman, he quarterbacked the football team, weighing in at a solid 98 pounds. About this time, he became interested in boxing and went on to win the Alabama Bantamweight Boxing Championships in 1936 and again in 1937. He also had time to serve as president of his senior class at Barber High School and as a page in the state senate. After graduation from high school, it was off to the University of Alabama in 1937, where he captained the freshman baseball team, was a member of the university boxing team, and was elected president of the freshman class. He graduated from law school in 1942, but settled for his first job driving a truck for the State Highway Department in Tuscaloosa for 30 cents an hour. It was during this time that he met a 16-year-old girl named Lurleen Burns. She was working in a dime store after graduation from high school and completing a business course. They married in May of 1943, 7 months after George had enlisted as a cadet in the Army Air Corps. Later, he served as a flight engineer on a B-29 called the Sentimental Journey, operating out of the Mariana Islands. After the war, Governor Chauncey Sparks helped George Wallace get a $175 a month job as an assistant attorney general. A year later, he took a 3-month leave of absence to run for the state legislature from Barber County. He won, defeating 2 opponents. He served his first term, leaving the House in 1952 after being elected circuit judge in Barber County. He made his first statewide race in 1958, losing to John Patterson in the governor's race. After a stormy career on the circuit bench in Barber County, George Wallace ran for governor again in 1962, leading Ryan DeGraffenreid in the primary by 46,000 votes. Here's a sample of the rhetoric in that campaign 20 years ago.
I shall work to bring new industry into Alabama during my administration. I want to see a new plant in every city and town in this state within the next 4 years. And I shall travel all over the nation hunting industry that's coming south and telling them of the wonderful opportunities for industrial development within our state in order that the peoples of Alabama might find employment here in Alabama.
After winning the governor's race in 1962, there were a number of turning points in the political career of George Wallace. Highlights of his early years in office include the establishment of the junior college and technical school system, free textbooks, industrial recruitment and job training programs. Then there was the election of Governor Lurleen Wallace in 1966 and her tragic death in 1968. George Wallace's close call in the 1970 election with Albert Brewer, the lieutenant governor who had succeeded the late Governor Lurleen Wallace. Wallace trailed Brewer in the primary, but came back after an incredibly bitter 3-week runoff campaign to win election by 30,000 votes. Then came the near-fatal assassination attempt in Laurel, Maryland in 1972, which left Wallace paralyzed but far from out of the political mainstream of the nation and Alabama. There were presidential races in 1964, 68, 72, and briefly in 1976. George Wallace made a significant impact on the national political structure by making both parties aware of the wide base of support for conservative choices on a variety of political, social, and economic issues. Wallace was re-elected governor in 1974, could not succeed himself in 1978, the year of the new beginning, but in 1982, George Wallace came back strong, defeating a host of Democrats and a strong Republican bid to take the oath of office as governor for a record 4th time.
Faithfully and honestly.
I will faithfully and honestly.
Discharge the duties of the office.
Discharge the duties of the office.
Upon which I am about to enter.
Upon which I am about to enter.
To the best of my ability.
To the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
His inaugural address came almost 20 years to the day after his Segregation Forever speech. But this time he spoke of justice and mercy and the need to remember the poor. He went on to appoint blacks to cabinet-level posts and judgeships. Wallace's final term in office was marked by repeated illnesses. He was frequently hospitalized in Montgomery and Birmingham and was described as suffering excruciating pain associated with his paralysis. His health was a major factor in his decision not to seek a fifth term in office.
My heart will always belong to Alabama. I expect to be around, the Lord willing, a few more years. But as far as the governmental and political arena, my fellow Alabamians, I bid you a fond and affectionate farewell.
He left office January 19, 1987, watching as the state's first Republican governor in modern times took the oath. Wallace shared in the inauguration by administering the oath for his son, George Jr., who had been elected state treasurer. Less than a month later, his third wife quietly filed for divorce, which Wallace did not contest. Wallace took a position with Troy State University in Montgomery, a mostly ceremonial post arranged by his longtime friend, Troy State University Chancellor Dr. Ralph Adams. But the politicians never forgot Wallace. In 1988, Democratic presidential candidates, including Jesse Jackson and Michael Dukakis, sought Wallace's endorsement. Wallace spent most of his final years still battling the after effects of the assassination attempt. But Wallace said he forgave Arthur Bremer for shooting him. Wallace said while recovering from the gunshot wounds, he realized how fragile life is and how uncertain it is, and how one ought to always be prepared to go. I'm Bob Howell, WSFA News 12, Montgomery.
Really had to bother much about selling or even advertising its handmade phantoms, silver clouds, silver spirits, silver spurs, and Bentleys. Satisfied customers include some familiar faces, along with some not-so-familiar beards. Last year alone, 3,100 people of means, a third of them Americans, spent an average of $88,000 apiece just to own a new Rolls. But this year, the same worldwide recession which has crippled the U.S. auto industry has bruised the best of British, and projected sales are down by over 22%.
People are being a little more careful where they spend their money at the moment, and I think there's a little uncertainty generally throughout the world, and people are more cautious, and they may be hanging on to their cars a little longer, waiting to see, and that's bound to affect us.
So bad is the oversupply of new and used Rolls-Royce
Color
cars.
portraits 5, including 95-cent deposit. You can save today's precious moments at Sears.
What do you want to call your cookies, Mr. Keebler? Chips what?
Well, let's see. The chips are big.
Chips big.
Wait, they're soft, too.
Chips soft.
Our chocolatey chips are so big and soft, they practically melt in your mouth. We put them in cookies made with real eggs and brown sugar. So we need a name that's special.
Call them Chips Deluxe.
As long as you're not a vegetarian.
That family doesn't have a boat. Now, you may not think living in your cup of tea, but you can't beat the cost. They tell us that the cost of a teepee in 1983 is $400, and the manufacturer says the sales are actually booming. You can even buy a solar-heated teepee. As long as it had cable, I wouldn't mind what it was. Stay with us. We'll be back with more PM Magazine in just a moment.
The driver asked for a repair bill. He was told politely, "Sir, you must have imagined it all. A Rolls-Royce never breaks down." In London's Knightsbridge district, the fast lane of fashion and tradition.
Are coming back in style.
Heard they are. I like that on you. That looks good. But you better consult our fashion forecaster, Paula Rush-Jokey, before you buy it.
I certainly will.
But next up, Ken Herr, our outrageous attorney, will reveal when you need a lawyer, and more important, when you don't need a lawyer.
And then PM's very own fashion forecaster will show you how to type your skin.
Top story in this country, President Reagan today declared his support for a 5-cent a gallon increase in the federal tax on gasoline, no matter what kind of a car you put it in. The user fee, as Mr. Reagan prefers to call it,
Okay, the pickup for the Poland hijack. Atlanta reading this? Atlanta reading this?
Level good?
Level good. Okay, so this is a pickup from Poland over 11 months ago. 3, 2, 1. 4 passengers also took the opportunity to escape, and is pick up again. 3, 2, 1. 4 passengers joined the hijacker and took the opportunity to escape. As in earlier, West German authorities are expected to grant asylum, but the hijacker will face trial in a German court. Only 1 month ago, a West Berlin court sentenced 7 Poles involved in a similar hijacking to sentences ranging from 3 to 4 years. Peter Hume, CNN.
schedule is still uncertain. In fact, State Department officials are... The Secretary's trip will consist of just overnight stops in Egypt and in Israel. His schedule is still uncertain. In fact, State Department officials are not yet sure with whom Haig will be meeting when he gets to the Middle East. But very knowledgeable sources involved in Middle East diplomacy tell CNN Haig plans to give both countries a strong nudge to get on with an agreement on Palestinian autonomy. These sources say Haig feels forced by strained U.S.-Israeli relations and other Mideast developments to become personally involved in the autonomy talks. They say Haig would rather not become tied to a new round of shuttle diplomacy between Cairo and Jerusalem now, because he's distracted by other world problems, notably involving Libya and Poland. Haig will visit Egypt and Israel January 12th through 14th, following his participation in a NATO ministers' meeting on Poland scheduled for next week in Brussels. Sources say Haig will try to decide whether a new special Middle East envoy could help move the autonomy talks along. Israel wants an agreement quickly before it withdraws from the Sinai in the spring. Egypt has been in no hurry, waiting first to see if Israel actually does turn over the Sinai in accordance with the Camp David agreement. A lot has happened in the Middle East since last summer, one source points out. U.S. AWACS planes sold to Saudi Arabia, the death of Anwar Sadat, Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, and the signing and withdrawal of a strategic cooperation agreement between the U.S. and Israel. For Haig, a first-hand look at the Middle East now could enable him to see whether Egyptian-Israeli autonomy talks may still bear fruit after all those changes. Ralph Begleiter, CNN at the State Department.